This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast. And I have to tell you, my next guest is someone that I've wanted to invite on for a while, and I've waited until she's about 8 months pregnant as we record this in November 2021. And by the time you're listening or watching this, we hopefully will have a mini Leyland sat bouncing on her knee. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Emily Leyland, who is the co-founder of Fresh Perspective and also a podcast host on A Fresh Perspective in Business. Welcome to you today, Emily. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you. I love that intro.
Well, you know,
I feel like a celebrity.
Oh, you do. Honestly, if you're not already following Emily on social media, particularly on LinkedIn, you need to get over there because you share the most wonderfully, literally fresh perspective of your life with your dog. You and Laura are just so inspiring to so many people because you just share really authentic content, and it does get noticed. It really does. It elevates you.
Oh, thank you. No, it's hard work coming up with content every day, but when you're actually quite authentic, it does make life a little bit easier because you can just post what comes into your head, which is
I was going to say things that are happening in real life every day. Well, thank you very much for, you've definitely kept an audience uplifted through very challenging times. And as we look to the future, we can't wait to hear what your business has in store. But for those who are not yet familiar, tell us a little bit about how Fresh Perspective came about.
Yeah, so we are 5.5 now. I don't know, would that make us like year 3 at primary school? I don't know, year 2, year 3. But yeah, we are still relatively young in the grand scheme of things. But I suppose we'd kind of done the whole like glass ceiling at our last place. So we were internal recruiters, and we spent a lot of time in agency before that and went internal, went over to the dark side. And we kind of, even though we were a part of the business where we came from, they didn't really know what we did. And that wasn't them doing anything bad. It was more just ignorance to recruitment and I suppose the ins and outs of it. So we kind of ran our own function, but it got to the point where we weren't going to make any more money. We weren't going to progress more. It was literally metaphorical glass ceiling. And so it was a bit like, well, what we're going to do? Do we want to just do this because we're really ambitious, tenacious, driven people? And so we thought, no, we'd like to be able to do this, but for several different clients. So we wanted to apply that internal theory, if you will, of recruitment where it's done well, but to do it for several businesses. So we left, but we were in a contract at the time, so we weren't allowed to set up at the same time. So Laura had to leave first and I had to leave 3 months later, which made setting up a business quite tough because she had to take all the risk. Because I was kind of going through a mortgage at the time, getting my first house. And then eventually I joined her. And that was it, really. I suppose the rest is history, but it came out of that idea of wanting to make recruitment better, wanting to put the fun and positivity into it and show people that it can be done well. Like, it doesn't always need to be this thing that annoys everyone and takes too much time and people see it as being cutthroat. It can be the total opposite to all of that. And that's where we are today. We're still changing, I suppose, the perception and reputation of it. But I do feel like we took a big chunk out of it and have almost successfully done that. But there's a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely. And just as an aside, what's it like working with your sister?
Yeah, I mean, me and Laura are pretty forward. We say it like it is. We're not really those people who are shy and retiring. So we tend to have a bit of a blowout about every 6 months where we want to kill each other. And then I want to smash her head into stuff. Laura's not as violent as I am, so she can kind of keep a lid on it. She's definitely the sensible one and I'm the erratic one. But I suppose that works because we are, as much as we're really similar in a lot of ways, we are quite different. And so we do bring two totally different perspectives. So yeah, sometimes it can get a bit tense between us, but that's when we go on these mad spiritual retreats where we sort of get back to actually being sisters. Because I think you do forget that you're sisters sometimes and that you need to spend that time out of work together. But honestly, it does really, really work, even though sometimes, I want to hurt her, but in a good way.
As one of I'm the eldest of 5 siblings, so so
there's
4 sisters in my family, so I know what you're talking about. And it'd be interesting to know if any of our audience have a similar experience working with a sibling. I haven't actually ever worked with a sibling, but I've interviewed plenty of couplepreneurs, so that's why I thought it'd be very interesting to find out whether But I think when you are lucky enough to have a sibling, if you then get the opportunity to work together, I think that there's just such a deep level of trust and friendship, generally speaking, that the compatibility is that even though you are very different, you and Laura, clearly that naturally works. So I think it's interesting. It'd be interesting to know what people feel when they come and work for you, which I think leads on very nicely really to what I want to talk to you about, which is, you know, as you've grown over the last few years, one of the sort of key focuses for you has been growing your own. So talk us through maybe why you've gone down that route, sort of growing your own, and then what your learns have been along the way. Because I think for our audience, particularly those who are running recruitment businesses, that is the reality when there's such a talent short market in recruitment, which obviously I'm saying but also those who are listening, we do get a lot of people listening who are in their first sort of throes of their recruitment career, who maybe you can impart some advice. So just give us an idea of why the trainee route.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that point of what you said about the whole trust thing, just going back to that about siblings. And this does answer the question. I'm not going off on a tangent, not just yet anyway, but it is, when you work with someone in that situation, they've always got your back. So even when you mess things up and you do things wrong and you make mistakes, which we will do, you've got someone who will have your back and almost will judge you, but not judge you fully like other people do. And that does answer your next question. So our dad had a family business when we were little, and so we kind of got brought up in the whole family business sort of world. And he had it with his brother and who else, and they actually worked together quite a lot. And I suppose me and Laura did that. And we wanted, one of the big things, and sometimes I think maybe this was the wrong thing to do, but it's hard not to. I wanted, as someone who's had anxiety I remember being anxious when I was in reception at primary school, so for a really, really long time. And I remember feeling like I was uncomfortable and, you know, like there was no safe place. And then that kind of transpired into school, into high school, into work. And you know that feeling when you get on a Sunday and you're like, oh my goodness, like everyone gets a bit of that fear that they can't be bothered with the week, but this is crippling where you're bedbound and you're like, I do not want to go to work. And one of the big things that I really wanted to create when setting up Fresh was a safe place for people to come and work. Somewhere where they would look forward to coming in on a Monday, however rough they were from the weekend. However, you know, if they'd had some particular troubles over the weekend, they'd still feel like, you know what, I still want to go into work and I want to add value and I want to do a good job and I want to feel like, yeah, I did something good that day. And that was like, I don't know if sometimes maybe I've stepped over the line and been too empowering, too inspiring, too supportive, because then the whole colleague and an employee and friend thing kind of gets a bit mashed up, and then when people leave, you're very, very, very sad. So that's a sort of fine balance to manage. But it was creating that place where people could come, and it was almost non-judgmental, where they could come and they might have been, you know, like our girls, like one girl's working at Next, one girl's working at Starbucks, and they believed that they didn't really have much of a career or didn't have really the prospects that they would like. And then we brought them in as trainees, so as literal recruitment virgins entirely. You know, they had no experience, but we didn't. I suppose the reason why we did that is to, I suppose, empower those. And it was always girls. We have got a boy now, thank God. I'm trying to hit more of the diversity. That is not the reason why we hired him, but you know, he does kind of tick that box now, which is great. But it was giving people that opportunity that maybe, you know, a lot of girls can get quite passive and feel like, you know, I've not really got that many prospects. I suffer with confidence and self-esteem issues and that kind of stuff. And so we wanted to almost advertise it as that you don't need recruitment experience, because we will teach you that. And then obviously you can grow and prosper and stuff. And it's really worked because our model is so different. And so you don't necessarily need recruitment experience, because we wouldn't teach you the agency way anyway. It's almost like the opposite. So we work, like you work on behalf of your candidates. We work on behalf of our clients. It's a complete and utter flip. It's very much like the clients who we deal with, and then we would then go and source on behalf of those. So it's much more like we could train them. It's much more about your attitude rather than your aptitude. But I still think, even if you had an agency, that you could do it that way. I still think you can bring on trainees, and obviously there's loads of ideas that I've got that I will impart on how to do that. But I think I've answered your question. Yeah. I'm trying hard to bring myself back.
No, you do, and I love, that's why I make it conversational, because I love how people go off, you know, you think you're on a tangent and you're giving loads of value.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing some vulnerability there about your anxiety, because I think that certainly since COVID began in March 2020, people are a lot more open about talking about anxiety and about how common it is. I actually don't know anybody that hasn't at some point in their life had some form of crippling anxiety. And I love how you sort of gave the, for me, for you to have created a business that's psychologically safe for people to want to come in on a Monday morning, that whatever else they've got going on, I think you should applaud yourself. It actually made me go when you said that, because I think it's actually something I appreciate, because you never lose, that Sunday night preschool feeling of, oh God, I don't want to go in and do X lesson in the morning. For me, I've got a sort of, well, I use the saying carpe diem. I think everyone knows what it means, seize the day. If you're not doing a job that you enjoy, then you need to change your job. So I think if you've created an environment where people are going to love coming to work, so I think that's something I really want to thank you for sharing that, because that was a very personal.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for that. So just in terms of, you mentioned there are a couple of backgrounds, the hospitality and retail background has always been a very attractive background for recruitment traits, let's say, because traditionally there's long hours, you have to work very, customer facing in both of those environments. So when you interview a potential trainee, what are you focusing on in the interview?
Good question. I think we do quite a detailed interview process, and I suppose why wouldn't we? And then that's how we would obviously service our clients as well. We do personality profiling, but we also get them to almost cover all elements of what they'd be doing in the role. So, for example, like when we've got a client who is, got a really nice vibe and they're really out there and modern, and then we get them into the interview process and they're like, yeah, everything's going really well. We get these candidates in and they're really happy. And then the client then doesn't know how to interview, so pulls a bunch of competency-based questions off the internet, bores the candidate to death, and then we lose them. And I'm like, right, well, what have we done there? What do we need to do differently? And this is how interviewing should not be. I literally hate competency-based questions. For me, they are like the enemy, because you can just prep for them. You don't get any kind of natural response to anything. And surely that's not what we're looking for in an interview scenario. So with us, I suppose how we interview is no different. So we do a video application really early on. So, and this is just quite chill, because you're going to have to get involved in video. We're a really forward-facing brand. So we do just get you to like introduce yourself, obviously talk about yourself. You can have your dog, cat, crocodile, whatever the hell you've got in the video. It's nice and chilled. And then we'd always get you to answer some questions like, and not ego-filled questions like, why do you want to work at Fresh? It's, why are you interested in taking this further? What was it that brought you here in the first place? Why did you look at us and think, oh, maybe I could see myself there? So then we're getting into the psyche a little bit. And then obviously when they come in for an interview, it's really, really chill. So they come in and meet Lenny, my dog, because they have to like dogs. He's not going anywhere. He is a business partner. So there's no point. We got loads of grief on International Dog Day or something like that, because they were like, what about the people that don't like dogs? And I was like, well, that's fine, but why should Lenny not come to the office?
Absolutely.
He's my baby. He's going to come to the office. Like, that's just ridiculous. But anyway, so they'll meet Lenny and they'll meet the team and stuff like that. And then it is just really, really, really relaxed. So we always tell people that recruitment is like dating. And I don't know if you've ever used this analogy, but if I went on a date with you and you just talked about yourself for the whole time, I would probably think you're a bit of an idiot and I probably wouldn't follow you again. Whereas if you talked about yourself and you shared and you asked me and you built rapport and we talked about things that we liked and stuff, then we could potentially see where it would go. And interviewing for a business is no different. So it's 50-50, you are at equal footing. And this is where we tell our candidates, come prepared, come with a big notepad and a pen and come with us and interview us, because if you don't know by the time you leave what you would do if we offered you, then we've not done well enough. And it's that you shouldn't just be like, I want to work at Fresh because it looks all pink and fluffy. No, it's hard graft as well, and I won't tell you any different. But ultimately, you've got to find that out yourself. We just recently took on a girl I interviewed 2 years ago. She's called Andrea. And she was quite meek and mild like a couple of years ago. And I loved her. And I remembered her all this time. And but I thought, it's not right. It's not right at this moment in time. And I got back in touch with her and she was like, oh my God, yeah. Anyway, her resilience has literally gone from 0 to 1,000 in this 2-year period. She's really found herself and she's coming and she's just smashing it. She's on like week 3 now. It's like she's been here 6 months. She's absolutely nailed it. But the interview almost was no different for her. It's just that she realized that, you know, if I want to get to where I need to be, I need to do some work on myself. And I love that, because I was like, she's gone and worked on herself and like forced herself to feel content in her own skin and like almost empowered herself, and then thought, you know, I'm ready for that. And she stayed at the same company but did a different job. And it was just really nice how she came back and we almost interviewed this person who had been on like a journey, which was just really, really, really nice. I know you can't always get in that situation, but for us, we want to know who people are outside of the day-to-day. Because if you give a crap about charity and being a better person and looking after the planet and actually giving something back, you know, if they care about people and animals, and if they care about like adding, like trying to, you know, inspire others, all that kind of stuff, and we can absolutely teach them how to recruit successfully. But then we're dealing with the right people, and we've got all these people who feel the same working in one kind of scenario, which I think is just absolutely magical. So I don't think there's any secret sauce with Instagram apart from just being a human being. Which
well,
people get it wrong, don't they?
There's so many things that people hopefully have taken note of there that are thinking of going down the hiring trainee route, that actually I agree with you. Please let's park the competency-based questions, because to be honest with you, they're boring to ask, they're boring to answer. And what you tend to find as well is that very often people don't really listen to the question, they just assume what you're about to ask them. Isn't it better to do, Emily's suggesting they're basically focusing on behaviours, mindset, you know, what the values of that person are, who actually are you? I love the dating analogy. I think that's brilliant. I agree with you that even if you're listening to this and you might be totally intimidated by the person interviewing you, they are a human being too. So on which level are you going to form a relationship? It's not going to, there's no parity when you're going in as a trainee, but you can ask them, what did you do when you started here? How did you get a job? What would you have done in my position? You know, get them to talk about them in that way, and you're making it much more level playing field. So I love your advice. I think it's brilliant.
Absolutely. And just to add, like, I don't know if, you know, the people that are listening, as an opening question in a face-to-face interview. So I'd always say never invite someone straight to face-to-face interview, because it's your territory. They're turning up to your place. It's very much like, we own this space. Well, no, you don't. You've invited them in. Whereas if you do a call, it's kind of like level playing field, and it can be nice and relaxed, and then they're prepared for coming in. It's like, I know this person's nice. They were nice to me on the phone. They're not going to try and trip me up. And so it does kind of help a little bit. But also, I'd say the first question that so many of our clients ask is, what do you know about us? And I just said, what do you know about this candidate? Because let's start there. So for me, it shouldn't be, right, Emily, so what do you know about Fresh Perspective? Like, we never ask this question. It's like, why are you here? Why do you want to know about us?
Yeah.
You know, what is it that's got you here today? Why have you got in your car or whatever and made it here today? And that's the difference, because then it's a truthful answer. Whereas I remember prepping for interviews, and I'd be on the internet just like absorbing the information, because I was so scared of being asked this question and answering it wrong, that I didn't actually think, do I want to work here? I never asked that to myself. I was just like, I need to know about this company, otherwise I'm gonna fail the interview.
Next time, if you're listening, next time, if you're a trainee listening to this, the next time you get asked that question, so what do you know about, you know, obviously, well, let's call it ABC company, you go, absolutely jack shit, because your website's rubbish, but I'm here. It's just,
I'm here. So tell me about it now. Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Or we've had a webcam malfunction. So when you have brought trainees into your business, the key thing I reckon is going to be about onboarding. And you know, the world has changed now. I know that you've got a beautiful new office up in Chorley, but for those listening who maybe have got a virtual or a hybrid model, how does onboarding trainees actually work in reality?
Yeah, okay. So really good question. Like, so many, I think when we talk recruitment, we know what onboarding is, don't we? Because we talk about it all the time, but so many clients out there have no idea what onboarding is. And it's so important. It's important for everything, whether it's rec to rec, you know, it doesn't matter. You've got to be onboarding people properly. And I think if you always think you're onboarding a trainee, you're never going to go far wrong. Because if you're onboarding someone with loads of experience, it doesn't mean they've ever been onboarded into X business before. And so they therefore need to be onboarded, which is just a fancy way of saying welcomed, isn't it? So it doesn't need to be more dressed up than that. So I hate processes. I am the world's worst administrator. I can't stand tasks that make me sit and only focus on that. I like being distracted, which is really bad when it comes down to stuff like this. But I forced myself to start writing processes. And now we've got a folder that's like this big of obviously like written ones. They're online as well. We're not that archaic. But it forced me to get organized, because what I almost wanted was, we would never get someone to train themselves at Fresh. But if for whatever reason, no one was here and everyone was doing something else, you could follow our processes and you could train yourself. So it's like, like the world's going to end kind of thing. Then you still need to do your job. But it's obviously not always been like that. But I suppose it started out by just welcoming people. So they'd get an offer after the interview, never offer in the interview. That's another bit of advice. You are, again, we're keeping that sort of 50-50, then you're not going to be like, because it's just like to run up to a stranger and saying, will you go out with me? Don't do it, because that is desperation.
Be a bit cool with it.
Be cool, yeah. And it's the same. This is what we say to our clients. It's like, chill out, give them time to process the information and think, because guess what? They might have a question, or they might not be happy with something, and that's the same. So we'd interview them, let them go away, speak to them afterwards, obviously get the lowdown. What do you like? What do you not like? What would you change? If you could, if you got an offer at this, would you accept it? Or how do you feel about benefits package? Blah, blah, blah. Ask loads of questions, get the lowdown. And then obviously, if you're at that point and you feel like, you know what, they'd probably accept our offer, then accept an offer. And this is all part of onboarding, because whatever you're doing now paves the way for the future. It's a message, isn't it? It's first impressions, because this is where you're kind of bringing them into your family. And so it's got to be done well. So once they've obviously accepted them, I would always suggest doing the HR bits and sort of spreading it out. So I will talk about the onboarding actually once they're in the business. But I think this is really important, because what happens in this sort of notice period, and you'll probably know it, where no one's keeping in touch with this candidate, they've got a foot in one camp, a foot in the other, and there's a big open space in the middle. And if you're not prepared to welcome your newbie at that point, then they will go somewhere else. And you will be devastated, because all that work has been done for no reason. And this theory is applied everywhere. So I'd always stretch out your new starter stuff. So contracts, offer letters, medical questionnaires, all the HR crap. Get it done, but get it done throughout this notice period. Yeah. Maybe share your induction if you've got one ahead of time. Bring them in for a brew, organise, meet the teams, get them into the WhatsApp group, get them following you on social media, follow them on social media. Basically, you want to be in their space. You want them to feel like, do you know what? I have made the right decision by accepting that offer. And if for 1 second they think opposite to that, you failed. You failed, and then there's a chance that they could go somewhere else. So I think all that for me is where onboarding starts. And then obviously once they join the business, so everyone should know that you've got a new starter on day one. I can't stand it when you're in office, someone comes in and no one looks up and says hello. It's the most intimidating. Even when you go to get your hair done and no one says, I love you, all right, just take a seat. You feel like, oh God, I feel like I've walked in at the wrong time. You want to feel welcome, don't you? So it's no different. People should know. You've got a massive office, the receptionist or whoever, front of house, should know to be like, are you such and such a body? Right, just come here, let's get you a brew. You've got to feel welcome, because they've made a big decision moving jobs. So it doesn't matter where they've come from, what they've been doing. It should be handled well. And I'm really, really passionate about this, because it is just really simple. And I get that it's not anyone's job, but if you got a process for it and it's like, right, let's tick off the list, literally add to WhatsApp group, it isn't that difficult or challenging. And then at that point, I'd always give them an induction. Now our induction has grown arms and legs. It's like 6 pages long now. But it's almost like a checklist as well. So you go through it and you could star bits that you might need a bit more sort of information on, or exposure or whatever. And then obviously you could cross stuff out that you know and you've done and blah, blah, blah. And then it's almost like, your little like, it's what's going to be expected of you in month one. And there's no sort of like pressure if you're not necessarily there after month one, but it's just a guide, sort of how-to guide. But we often share this with people before they even start. And then what I do as well with trainees is, everyone's been a trainee. We hired one recruiter once, and it didn't work. It didn't work at all, and it was because she knew something totally different and almost couldn't unpick. It's almost like, like trying to pass your driving test again after getting loads of bad habits. she just couldn't unpick it, and it just didn't work out for both sides really, which was interesting. But I always get my team as well to support with the induction, so it's not just me who does it, even though I'm the person in the business sort of in charge of it. We get other people to go through like our life cycle, because again, that's really different. We get people to do sort of system training, process training, that kind of thing. And so they're getting to know the team as well, and and the team members can step up and be more of a sort of leading role. So I think a lot of people get freaked out when they don't have an induction in place, but all it is what do you expect of someone in the first week, 2 weeks, a month? Get it written down, and then you can almost get them to write their own induction. Right, what else did you do that week? Let's stick it on here. And then what we can do, once you're flying, you could almost rewrite the next induction for the next person. Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily need to be like, literally, that's what happens. Like I've got my newbies to write the processes. I've got Cheryl and Cameron to rewrite the processes, because then there's no point in me writing it, because I do this stuff day in, day out, and I'll never be able to write a process that's a sort of how-to guide like you guys do.
You're on it. You're doing it. That's really good advice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. So they all get involved with it, and then it's really nice, because then they're like, oh my God, look how much stuff I know. And that's really nice for them. So it sounds complicated, but it's not, is it? It just needs a process.
No, absolutely. No, there's a couple of things I want to pick up on there. First and foremost, I think, the onboarding process that starts the day they accept your job.
100%.
It starts. And actually, I think I always advise my clients, whether it's a trainee or a director, invite them in, get everybody, so that on that day one where you've talked about everyone walking in going hello, they already know who that person is. I think it's really important. And I think especially for a trainee, because that, most markets that are hiring in at this sort of first entry level, they're going to have an absolute array of opportunities welcome to them. So if you're not making them feel special, someone else will. And I think the other thing that I want to is managing expectations. I think that by creating an onboarding program, and obviously therefore an induction, where you're basically stating what the expectations of you are, but these are what your expectations of me should be. It's just how your communication is going to go on from there on in, which is open, honest, come and chat to us. It's agile. There might be things in that induction that you think actually you could do this better. So it should always be a two-way thing. There's no question about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I absolutely love that. Okay. And so in terms of that, I think, given the audience that's going to listen to this, some of them will be in their first stages of recruitment. Social media has been part and parcel of their life from day one. So what would you say the do's and don'ts might be of creating a credible social media brand? Because although we live on LinkedIn, a lot of the sort of entry level people might be on Instagram, they might be on TikTok. So what would your sort of do's and don'ts be around social media management?
God, yeah, do's and don'ts. I mean, definitely now we do live in this world where we love to share things online. I mean, I like to share things on LinkedIn, but ultimately, I wouldn't be doing that if I didn't have Fresh. I don't think. I probably wouldn't. I mean, I might. It's difficult for me to obviously think of a life without Fresh now, because I want Fresh to be out there. I want it to be in people's faces. I want people to know us, that kind of thing. So it is a little bit different. I feel like I'm doing it for that reason. But I think with regards to social media in the whole, you just got in the sort of whole is you just got to be really careful, because whatever you put on it can be found at a later date. And so when you don't, without even applying it to recruitment and stuff, like stuff can be found. Like I remember some of the stuff that I used to put on there when Facebook first came out, and it was just gross. Like it was just some of the names that I used to call the albums, because back then you'd put like loads of pictures up as an album, and then everyone would just be able to see this album from the night, and it was totally different to how it is now. But I just think some of the words that I used were just absolutely disgusting, and I just think, oh God, if I didn't have my own business, it'd be awful. Because it probably wouldn't be. Luckily, someone reported my old profile and it got taken down, because then at least I don't have all that crap to deal with, because it's literally disappeared from the internet. But it's just, you are your own brand ambassador, and I think now more than ever you are creating an online persona. So yeah, I think it's great to be vulnerable, honest, raw. I think it's really important not to always paint this perfect picture that life is great, like an Instagram life. But ultimately, whatever you're putting out there, because you change, don't you, day to day. Like one day you might think that you're the best feminist in the world, and 2 weeks later, you're feeling really bad about it. And so if you're sharing these inconsistencies, you've just got to be careful about what message that kind of puts out there, which I think is, it's just a tough world, isn't it? It's so transparent. It's like you're being watched all the time, like you're constantly on CCTV, which I don't really agree with. But I think I was saying this the other day, I don't know how you feel about this, Leisha, but we were saying the other day, like, candidates get an impeccable service at Fresh. And then we were like, and they don't pay a thing. Now, I'm not saying that candidates should start paying for recruitment, but I do think it needs to be a little bit more grateful when they do get an amazing service, probably like they do from you guys. But it is all for free, isn't it? The client is basically paying for this.
True.
And then where I sort of get a little bit irritated about with candidates is when they just put a CV together, it's a half-arsed document, and they don't put anything else. They don't like think, how should I present myself on social media? Maybe I should go a little bit further and try and be more proactive. Maybe I should do this and do that, and that supports myself in order to get to where I want to be. I think we've just got lazy, and it's because you don't have to part. If you had to part with money, you probably would do a better job of kind of putting yourself out there. So I think a lot of the time we're putting, especially now with COVID and the rest of it, you know, candidates are wanting to work from home a lot more and they still want the same salaries and stuff. But I do think they should be doing more really to market themselves, which is, you know, hopefully that doesn't go down wrong, because its advice is do better, you know, stand out from the competition.
I agree with you totally. You are your social media presence, and you take responsibility for every single photo that you share, every post that you share, every comment that you make. That is back to you. You can't blame anybody else for it. I'm chuckling because as a rec to rec, obviously I recruit recruiters. I have often mused how different the whole industry would be if candidates paid rather than clients. It's a bit like what we were talking off camera about, you know, if women run the world rather than men, how different things would be for the whole world, basically. But we'll share that in a different episode. Watch this space, everybody. But it's true. And I think your advice is impeccable, as always. You know, we're not asking you to, you know, be, you know, evangelical with what you do, but just think before you post. And it is on you. And if you think you're going to go and do your due diligence on a potential employer or company on their social media, well, that's exactly what they're going to do to you. And yes, they will find you on Twitter and they will find you on Facebook. If you're sharing posts on, you know, Britain First or whatever, something equally horrific, they will definitely judge you on it. I'm afraid that's what we do.
So. Of course they will. But that is what we do, and it's, you've got to, because it's like if you put as much effort into your CV and your actual personal brand from an employment perspective as you do about posting hate stuff on Twitter, then you probably will get the job of your dreams. And this is where I just think, just use that energy and that motivation and that drive and that curiosity and all that kind of stuff, and think, I really want to make a career for myself, so I'm going to channel it into that rather than just some crap that's on Instagram. And I just kind of wish that sometimes I'm like, and obviously we've got out of this. We've not been brought up in this stage now, are we? Where it must be really, really tough to live online. It must be really hard. And obviously it only came in when I was about 20. So it's like, I missed it in that respect. You know, I was battling to get a phone and it was like a massive Nokia when I was at school. And so I'm sort of outside looking in, and I can't empathize. It must be really hard. But I'm like, but think about where you want to be. Think about where you want to go. Like, do you want to just stay at home with your parents forever? Or do you want something bigger and better for yourself? Because you've got the right tools now. Just use them for good, not evil.
Based on the visual interruption that we had, those who've been watching on YouTube will have seen my daughter storm in and storm out. She missed the bus apparently for college. For those listening, hopefully it wasn't too disruptive in the background. But if you heard lots of stomping, that'll be the Doc Martens. But yeah, we need to make sure that, you know, that young people listening who are in the entry level stages of their career, in whatever career you're going to go into, whether it is recruitment, whether it's, you know, HR, you know, business, whatever it might be, you probably are already in a mindset of, you probably only share what you want to share, you know, because that is the Insta world, the reality of what they've grown up with this generation. But it's thinking about your views, thinking about the comments, thinking about, you know, how people are going to perceive you. And we're not asking you to compromise on things that you're passionate about that are positive. You know, I've recently partnered somebody who runs a whole community around sobriety. And she's gone into a recruitment company and has not given up that business. You know, she's still going to do both. So, you know, we're talking about a company that's going to embrace that. And that's clearly what Fresh Perspective is. You know, we're not talking about you chiseling off bits of your personality or your past. It's just thinking about you are a brand. Everything Emily said is right there. You are a brand. Definitely.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just, yeah, you definitely, and it's really important that you back that up. You know, it's not about stifling you and your personality, but obviously you have got to think about where you want to be as well. And it's rubbish having to think in the future, because God, I'd love to be present. I'd give anything to feel present. But, and if you do, then that is great. Stay there as long as you can. But you do have to just think, what message is this sending? And you will learn the hard way as well, which, you know, it's sometimes it's good to learn the hard way though, because it does give you a bit of a shake and you think, right, well, I've learned the hard way now, so this is what I'm going to do to sort of get out of that and change direction.
This is all advice I'm sure that you're going to give to your newly born daughter. And so that leads very much to my last question, which is, as we record this on the cusp of 2022, and when we're listening to this now, we're definitely going to be in the new year. What does the future have in store for Fresh Perspective and to you, Emily?
Oh, thank you. No, that's a lovely last question. I mean, I didn't necessarily expect to get pregnant, especially not in this year. But you know, it happened, and I will happily accept it eventually. But yeah, obviously I'm going to be going on maternity leave. I don't even know what maternity leave is like for business owners, because I can't imagine that I'm going to shut off. So it's going to be a little weird. I mean, what we did, we've recruited 6 people recently. And 5 of those will go on to delivery. So we sort of split our model up into sales and delivery. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. But I think sales and finding candidates jobs are 2 quite different personality stacks. And a lot of people go hybrid, which is the sort of traditional model. But we don't here stereotypically. We do, obviously, we've got the skills. But we did hire a manager. And this is our first non-trainee, which I think is quite nice. It's the first person that we brought in who is at a level where we need them to be, so then they can almost become me. So that person will almost kind of fill my shoes for this year, so 2022. So they will support Laura from, you know, sort of a management point of view, get involved in sales and all the rest of it. And then when I come back, which will sort of be like around September time for definite, but I don't know right now. It's difficult for me to obviously say, because I don't know how I'm going to take to motherhood and what the plans are going to feel like when she's actually here. But yeah, Andrew will kind of step into my shoes, but with a view to absolutely stepping out and becoming herself within the business. But right now, what we need that support for Laura, and then when she will sort of shadow and that kind of thing. And then when I come back is that we can actually do what we've been meaning to do for years, is me and Laura will really step back from the day-to-day of Fresh. So obviously the team will have some more hierarchy. You'll have consultants, team leads and managers, and we'll start to build, because we're quite a flat structured business. You know, it's not about the managers do this and the consultants do that. It's not like that. It's really flat. So it's been difficult for us to put hierarchy in, because it's very much that everyone's got a place, everyone's got a voice, everyone matters. But we need hierarchy, otherwise me and Laura will never be able to move the business on. So we want to step back and do visionary stuff. We want to get into public speaking, run events, we want to run our own networking event, do a lot more sort of for charity and giving back and that kind of thing, speaking in schools, like all that sort of stuff. And then we want to eventually maybe bring in sort of fresh marketing in-house, fresh HR, fresh finance, and almost become like a one-stop shop for our clients, but obviously for ourselves as well. So that's kind of, it will be the sort of back end of 2022 and kind of going into 2023. So there's a lot going on. It's just COVID, Brexit, and now me being pregnant has kind of prevented us from doing this. But
your new baby to Brexit. You cannot compare your new baby. It sounds like the future is very fresh and very bright for you. And, you know, I warmly wish you all the best of becoming a first-time parent. And I'm sure you're going to be an equally amazing parent as you are a business person. You're very inspiring, Emily. And, you know, as is Laura. You know, I think that both of you share such beautiful content, as I say, and thank you from everybody that watches. And if you're not already part of their community, please head over to Fresh Perspective. Make sure you're listening into their podcast as well. And we warmly wish you all the best. And we hope that you deliver on all those plans. And thank you for sharing such amazing information and advice to our audience.
No, you're more than welcome. Thank you for being such a lovely host with great questions. Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for joining us on the Recruitment Podcast.